أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله استعين واستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يعصهما فإنه لا يضر لنفسه ولا يضر لها شيئا. أما بعد، من أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأوثق كلمة التقوى وخير الملل ملة إبراهيم وخير السنن سنة محمد وأشرف الحديث ذكر الله وأحسن قصص هذا القرآن وخير الأمور وازمها وشر محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أما بعد، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم والذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. أما بعد، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. صدق الله العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل عليه وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فيا أيها المسلمون. Indeed, all of the praises for Allah. We seek His help and we seek His forgiveness and we seek Allah's protection from the evil of our own selves. Whomsoever Allah shows the righteous path, no one can mislead him. And whomsoever Allah deprives of the righteous path, no one can put him on the path of righteousness. And I bear witness that there is no God except Allah. Allah, He is one. He has no partner, no sons, no daughters. Allah is one. And I further testify that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is indeed Allah's servant and apostle. And He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sent Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as a giver of glad tidings and also as a warner ahead of the day of judgment. So whosoever obeys Allah and His Prophet, he is on the path of righteousness. And whosoever disobeys Allah and His Prophet, he harms himself and does no harm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the least. The most truthful speech and discourse is the book of Allah, Al-Quran, Al-Kareem, the final message of Allah for all of mankind. The blacks, the whites, the browns, the yellows, all races, all nationality. Praise be to Allah. Alhamdulillah, this Quran is a message from Allah for all of mankind. The most trustworthy advice is that we should have taqwa, that we should strive for uprightness, for God consciousness, for respecting God and obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The best of the communities is the community of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And here we make it very clear that we, as the Muslim Ummah, are part of the community of Ibrahim alayhi salam, he being the father of monotheism. The best way of life is the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and indeed the remembrance of Allah is the most glorious of all things. So we try to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as we enter our homes, as we greet our families, as we sit down and relax, and even before we go to bed and enter into a state of sleep, which is called a kind of state of death, because we don't know if we're going to wake up in the morning. We don't know. So we try to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. Inshallah, we wake up in the morning and we make wudu and we praise Allah again. We remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before we go off to work. And when we go off to work, as we encounter people on the work, on the job, in the schools, wherever we may be, we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Indeed, that's what the month of Ramadan is all about, trying to attain taqwa, so you maintain that God consciousness throughout the day and throughout the night, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah give us life to reach the month of Ramadan, inshallah, so we can purify ourselves, so we can beg Allah's forgiveness, and inshallah, maybe attain the state of taqwa after fasting the month of Ramadan. But we don't wait until then to begin our journey of change, trying to transform ourselves, trying to purify ourselves, because this is the month of Rajab. And this is a very important month, as we mentioned last week. Alhamdulillah, that month of preparation has finally entered upon us, so we have to start to prepare ourselves now, so we'll be ready, inshallah, for that great test of Ramadan. Otherwise, we will be merely what? Starving our bodies. We'll be simply going without food and water, and this is not what the fast is about. That's the methodology, but the objective is to attain taqwa, that God consciousness, so that we remember Allah when we see our brother and sister. We smile when we see our brother and sister, when we see our family members. And we have faith in Allah, whether things are tough or whether things are very easy. We remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in times of difficulty and in times of ease, inshallah ta'ala. So alhamdulillah, the remembrance of Allah is indeed the most glorious of all things, and the best of actions are those things that require that high degree of commitment, such as the fasting during the month of Ramadan. But we want to try to begin that process now, of trying to restrain ourselves from anger, restrain our tongue so we don't say stupid things, we don't say things that are hurtful to our brother and sister, to our family members, and so on. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us as we try to change ourselves to someone who is better. I just want to say in this khutbah today, I am going to abbreviate. I'm not going to go through the entire process, even though I'm going to give you the highlights of the story, because this is a very beautiful story in my humble opinion. First of all, I want to apologize. My internet is out. I don't know about you guys' neighborhood. My internet went down, so I couldn't give the exact thing I want to give. So if you allow me, I'm going to go to this wonderful device called an iPad and see if I can find this ayat from Quran that I want to bring to you, inshallah ta'ala. And this is from Surah Al-Qalam. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا بلوناهم كما بلونا أصحاب الجنة إذا أقسموا ليصرمنها مصبحين. And we have tested them, and I'll explain later who is them, as we, this is Allah speaking, and we, Allah, have tested them as we, Allah, had tested the owners of the garden, when they had sworn an oath that they would pluck its fruit on the following morning. That's enough, because otherwise it will take too much of your time. This is a very beautiful story, this one. And so the topic, I will call it the owners of the garden. And these are, of course, advices for us today, because we're living here today. But we reflect back to what's happened in the past. This story is based on an incident that occurred in Yemen, where a group of brothers inherited a very, very beautiful and lush garden. Unlike their generous father, these brothers had decided to deny the poor their share of the produce. Their plan was to secretly harvest the crops early in the morning, but this plan was thwarted by Allah's punishment, which destroyed their garden. This serves as a great lesson for people, including, yes, the disbelievers, but we should also reflect on that, because this is a lesson for the disbelievers, for example, of Mecca, about the consequences of greed and ingratitude. So this story of Ashab al-Jannah, the ardent and the owners of the garden. As I said, this family had a very, very lush and fertile garden, and this is in Yemen, and the head of the family was a pious and generous man who always was grateful to Allah, and he always thanked Allah for the many blessings which Allah had given him. This man had shared a significant portion all the time of the harvest with the poor and with the orphans and the needy. He didn't just keep his income for himself. That's the point. Because of his gratitude and generosity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He blessed the garden with abundant produce every year. After the father passed away, his sons inherited the garden, of course. Unlike their father, however, they were very selfish and greedy and ungrateful. They decided not to give anything to the poor and to secretly harvest the crops early in the morning to avoid sharing with anyone. So we encounter so many lessons, but in brief, the following is what I want to take from this brief story. And there's number one, charity versus greed, gratitude versus ingratitude, generosity versus stinginess, being cheap, in other words, remembering Allah and making plans and commitments. You see, in summary, these brothers, they plotted to reap the fruits at dawn, in other words, go very early, so that no one got caught there at the same time or before them, and particularly, they didn't want the poor people to come and get their share from the garden. However, in reflection, these hearts, they lacked gratitude and fear of Allah. They lacked what? Taqwa. They didn't even say, inshallah, to acknowledge Allah's power and His will. During the night when they were asleep, Allah sent a calamity that destroyed their garden entirely. So in the morning when they reached their garden, they found it was ruined. They stood in shock and despair, realizing their mistake and their arrogance. They repented, they did make tawbah, alhamdulillah, and they sought Allah's forgiveness, but by then their blessings were gone. Brothers and sisters, we should reflect on this story, and we should go to the Quran. Again, the chapter in the Quran is Al-Qalam, and this is the 69th chapter in the Quran, ayat 17 through 19 basically, but it goes a bit further than maybe 3 or 4 ayahs after that. But it suffices for us to reflect, because sometimes we read and we do things and we go on, but we don't reflect on the words of Allah. You see, for example, we're sitting here in this masjid and in the masjids around the world. We can be likened to this group of brothers who had inherited the deen of Islam from our spiritual ancestors, including the prophets of Allah, the messengers of Allah, even the Sahaba, the people, the Muhajirin, the Ansar. I'm talking about the helpers of Allah. That is referred to in the Hadith, of course. Those of you who have converted to Islam, as they call it, or reverted to Islam, those of you who have, I guess you can say, migrated from one place to another place and so on, it refers to all of us, the entire Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You see, we must strive to try to emulate this last prophet of Allah, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the best example of all mankind. You see, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught us how to be upright, how to be God conscious, how to be righteous, how to be God fearing, and so on. And I'm saying that, alhamdulillah, here we have the example of this Yemeni father who also did his best to try to exemplify taqwa, being righteous and upright, and being charitable and kind and generous to the poor and the weak and the oppressed. I'm saying that he had this garden, alhamdulillah, that Allah blessed him with. Of course, he had to work to produce the produce in the garden, but Allah, He's the one who gives the actual outcome from the garden, from the hard work. But even after doing that, alhamdulillah, he remembered Allah, and he donated a significant portion of that harvest to the poor, to the orphans, and to the needy in general. And subsequently, Allah blessed that garden, and the community with abundance every year. What's that got to do with us? It has everything to do with us, because I'm saying that we, Muslims, we have to be committed Muslims like that too, recognizing that we're something like the gardener. And at least we're supposed to be trying to be like the gardeners, and that is to be doing, sowing seeds of goodness through acts of kindness, charity, fasting, salah, sharing the Quran, da'wah, being fair and fighting for justice, and demonstrating that love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we do that through individual acts, but also through collective work, inshallah, throughout the society and the earth. Thereby, inshallah, we can cultivate our souls. Cultivate our souls, and inshallah, achieve Jannah to Firdaus, inshallah ta'ala. So, I'm inviting, first of all, as a reminder to myself, and then to yourselves, that we commit to take on that path of righteousness and being generous to humanity, to our families, of course, first and foremost, but also to the poor and the needy in our communities and in the society in general. And showing that generosity to all of humanity, and showing our gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-Razaq, the provider and sustainer of all. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to bless our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi salam and his family, as indeed he blessed Ibrahim alayhi salam and his family. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send his salams to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi salam and his family, as indeed he sent those salams to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and his family. We should always be aware that people are coming and going. The people are coming, being born, and babies are being born into this world, and we should be cognizant of that. But we should also be cognizant, aware of the fact that people are leaving, people passing away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive the sins of all of our brothers and sisters who have passed away, not just in the past week or this day, not just last month or last year, but since the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cause us to increase our da'wah and bring the people who are not Muslim, not yet Muslim, to Islam. At least spread the message of La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, knowing that it's only Allah that makes Muslims. We understand that. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروا يزده واستغفروه يغفر لكم واتقوا يجعل لكم من أمركم مخرجا. O servants of Allah, surely Allah, He commands justice and the doing of good and being generous to kith and kin, and He forbids all forms of indecency and shameful deeds and injustice and rebellion against His ordinances. And He, Allah, He instructs us that we might remember Him. So remember Allah, the Supreme One, in all His glory. He will remember you, and be thankful to Allah, and He will increase you in your wealth, and seek forgiveness from Allah. He will forgive you, and have taqwa of Him. Be respectful and God-fearing and righteous and upright. He, Allah, He will make a way for you out of your difficulties. Inshallah ta'ala. Yaqawat as-salah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala salah. Aqamatis salat, aqamatis salat. Allahu لا إله إلا الله.
Do your best to straighten the lines, inshallah. Make room for your brother. There's plenty of room here. Allahu Akbar. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.